Welcome to KAWC's Educating Yuma. I'm Cisco Stargazer, Education Solutions Reporter. In this program, we take a closer look at the schools, people, and issues shaping Yuma's future. Today's episode is a special deep dive on capital funding. A landmark ruling has determined the state isn't properly funding its schools, so we've spent the last few months figuring out how Yuma's schools have been affected. You'll hear from local educators.
What I believe is, yeah, we made it beautiful. Aren't you supposed to try to make your school clean and inviting? But we were crumbling. Our plumbing was crumbling and things like that were just not working.
And the lead counsel on the historic lawsuit.
We should care about that third grader. We should care about, his or her teacher, and we should fix this. That's our overarching message is this is fixable. We just have to care enough to do it.
All this and more on December's Educating Yuma. Article 11, Section 1 of the Arizona Constitution states, "The legislature shall enact such laws as shall provide for the establishment and maintenance of a general uniform public school system." But is Arizona's school system really uniform? In August of this year, a judge from the Maricopa County Superior Court has ruled it isn't. Glendale Elementary School District versus the state of Arizona was filed in 2017 with 4 school districts as plaintiffs, including Yuma's Crane Elementary School District. While Arizona has become known for a history of troubled public school funding, the lawsuit focuses on capital funding specifically, and it's not the first time the state's model has been challenged in court. Danny Edelman, executive director of the Arizona Center for Law and the Public Interest, has served as the center's lead counsel on this case. So we asked him for some background.
The way Arizona had it set up is almost all of the capital funding. And capital is everything from facilities to air conditioners, your roof, but it's also things like buses, curriculum, technology, security, infrastructure, all those things. The way Arizona funded that was largely dependent on the property values in each district, in each school district. One district may have 30 or 40 times the wealth of a poor district. And so it was much easier for a wealthy district to raise all the money they needed to have good schools, and it was much harder for a poor district to raise enough money locally for their schools. And so we sued in the early 90s, and the Supreme Court of Arizona threw out the way Arizona had funded the capital needs of public schools. And this was back in 1994. And said to the legislature, you need to fix this.
That lawsuit from 1994 was Roosevelt versus Bishop, and the state's response to the outcome was to create the Students First Act.
Students First was a funding system where the state first inspected and found out what were the existing problems in schools, and they fixed those. And then the Supreme Court said, it's the state's job to make sure that every school in Arizona has the minimum of what they need to have a good school.
The state then developed minimum standards by which to assess public schools.
And so they came up with different funding systems. They had funding systems to help districts keep their facilities in good shape. And it was given to schools every year, and they could plan ahead. Like if you know you're going to need a new roof, you can save up that money. And then bit by bit, they started taking that money away. And then it wasn't bit by bit. They just started canceling whole funding systems. And so ultimately, they had cut billions of dollars from the capital funding that they had come up with when they solved this last time. And so we sued again.
And thus, Arizona arguably fell back into a familiar trend of insufficient funding. Crane Elementary School District's Chief Financial Officer Dale Ponder explained that Arizona went from the Students First system, which provided annual funding to address needs, to a building renewal grant system. These grants are overseen by the Arizona School Facilities Oversight Board, which is supported by the state School Facilities Division.
And so it was through a grant system that required schools to prove that they had failed before we were able to get money from the state to correct those deficiencies. So you had to wait until you had a leaky roof. You had to wait until the classroom got hot because the air conditioning wasn't working. You had to wait till the building was no longer structurally sound. So you had to wait until it was proved to be deficient before it would be eligible for funds in order to correct the deficiency.
Ponder noted that the minimum standards the state uses in considering grants haven't been updated either, so schools are further struggling to keep up with modern demands.
We're operating on 25-year-old standards. There's really no standard included for any real type of safety and security. There's a statement in there about a fence or a wall, and that means that you have a secure facility. And so we know that the structure and the needs of communities have evolved over time, but the standards haven't followed that same suit.
But there is another issue with the grant system. It doesn't have enough money, so the grants have actually become competitive.
The last report from the School Facility Oversight Board, they said that they have nearly $400 million in needs and only received an appropriation of $200 million. So it requires them, that agency, to then prioritize and determine what deficiency is a greater deficiency than another. If there's a school district that has a classroom that can't meet the temperatures prescribed by the standard, that may be a lower priority in certain areas than maybe water infiltration. So what they call weatherization or roofing projects, those may be of a higher need. Maybe flooring is a lower need. Maybe exterior concrete may be a lower priority. So it really does cause the agency to prioritize how do they use the funds that they receive, which then creates this disparity between school districts.
The reality of the competitive grant system is something that came up in an interview we held with Jamie Sheldall in May when he was superintendent of Yuma School District 1. Sheldall shared what actually happens when there isn't enough funding. In his anecdote, District 1 had grants approved for 5 schools in 2022. 3 years ago.
We qualified at the time. The estimate was about somewhere around 22 or 23 million, if I remember right. The roofs were old enough, the doors were in bad shape and leaking like a sieve, and we have single pane windows. They approved 5 schools for basically a new roof, new windows, new doors, maybe new insulation, depending on what the assessment called for, to make them more efficient so they'd be less costly, from an energy standpoint, which energy costs keep going up. So of those 5 that were approved, now here we are. I think that was in 2022. Here we are in 2025, going into the 26th fiscal year. 1 of them has been funded. So what happens is the money that gets allocated for the grants is insufficient. So projects get approved, and unless it's an emergency, very few of those projects get funded in the year they're approved, and then the rest of them get pushed into the next year.
The district's current superintendent, Dennis Ponder, confirmed that continues to be a pretty accurate picture.
The responsibility that the Building Renewal Grant or the School Facilities Board group has is really, it's a challenging one. You have $200 million to service the needs of the entire state. Over 250 school districts in the state of Arizona, I want to say. Over 200 for sure. I don't know the exact number, but just think about that for a second. How far is $200 million going to go across the entire state? And so they have to make priority decisions just like we do. Their budget's probably tighter than ours. So it really comes down to safety.
District 1 is Arizona's 3rd oldest public school district. The majority of its schools are more than 60 years old. In fact, 4th Avenue Junior High has surpassed 100, and next year Roosevelt Elementary will too. Aging facilities are a big challenge for the district, and now that its most recent bond measure was rejected by voters in 2024, District 1 has joined the ranks of what Dale Ponder referred to as have-not districts.
The state has created this disparity, and so really requires this, quote, have and have not type of system where Crane is considered a have district, as we have bonds and overrides to help support our needs, and maybe another school district who does not have that support is considered a have not. So they become heavily reliant on the state in order to provide them the needs to meet their deficiencies when the state itself does not have enough money to meet the statewide needs.
Crane joined the lawsuit as an example of a have district since its voters typically pass bond and override measures. But it was more than that.
Really what we found, Cisco, is over time we have also become very reliant on our local property taxpayers to support the district. We're incredibly appreciative of their investments, but that's not something that the local taxpayers should have to carry the burden for, which is why the district was involved in being a part of this iteration.
Danny Edelman also agreed.
It's also unfair to local taxpayers, right? So, like, if you vote yes for a bond, what you're doing is you are taxing yourself for something that is a state responsibility, which is really unfair to taxpayers.
He explained that when the Arizona Supreme Court addressed this issue with Roosevelt, it said that the state's job was to pay for all the basics needed to have a good school. If local taxpayers wanted something more, they could agree to more taxation. And that's something that District 1 Superintendent Dennis Ponder also mentioned.
And so bonds were brought in to add the cherry on the top or the bell and whistle to the school. It wasn't designed to be able to, for us to say, well, this is the only way we can just do our basic maintenance. So the bonds were supposed to be there. So the state builds a 50,000 square foot high school, but I want a turf dome football field. Well, if your taxpayers want to pay for that and they'll support a bond, you can have a turf dome football field. Whereas right now it feels like the bond is, I need a new roof, so I'm going to ask my local taxpayers if they'll fund a bond so I can put new roofs on my schools.
According to Edelman, it wasn't until the state started taking money away from schools that districts needed to hold bond elections in order to keep their facilities in shape. While he considers this unfair to local taxpayers, he considers it even more so for those in rural and low-income areas.
When they started and then they continued taking all that extra money away, then districts needed bonds just to keep their facilities in decent shape and just to be able to satisfy these bare minimum standards. And that is really unfair to local taxpayers. And it's way more unfair, especially in rural and poorer areas, because how much it costs to raise, like, say you need $50 million. If you're in Scottsdale, where there's a lot of property wealth, you can raise that $50 million with a very tiny tax increase. But if you're in a little rural district where you don't have Scottsdale's wealth, then to raise that same $50 million costs 20 or 30 times as much. So you have to have a much bigger tax rate, which is just so unfair to local taxpayers.
Edelman visited many schools throughout the state of Arizona as part of his work on this case over the past 7 years. So we asked what he observed.
Honestly, it was heartbreaking. In the mountain area, I visited schools where they had like plastic chutes coming from the roof into classrooms where there were big garbage cans to try to collect the water because the roofs were leaking so badly. I was at districts that had kind of cloudy, gross-looking water. I was at districts where there was mold in the walls, in the ceiling. All that stuff. Broken air conditioners, failing roofs, walls that weren't watertight, almost complete lack of any security, poor air quality. The state did inspections and they found excessive CO2 in the vast majority of places wherever they looked. And, excessive CO2, so it's not carbon monoxide, it's carbon dioxide. But when it's excessive, it makes you less able to learn.
The court order for the lawsuit is over 100 pages, so there's more evidence to share than there is time in this show. But there are 2 local districts used as case studies. From Yuma County, Mohawk Valley School was identified as a school in need of dire repair. The order cited multiple deficiencies, including the lack of classroom projectors and teacher computers. But the school's restrooms became a focal point. Superintendent and Principal Shanna Johnson gave a deposition in 2021 that was used as evidence, but she spoke with KAWC in November to share more about her experience trying to get the school's capital needs met.
The struggle continues for districts, but what it was like when I first tried to do a building renewal grant, which we call a BRG, to fix a bathroom, a couple of different sets of bathrooms. We were told that it was because of lack of maintenance, that we had not taken care of things. And that's why they flat out denied to replace the bathrooms.
In Johnson's view, there were only so many times that the school could reattach 50-year-old wooden partitions to drywall.
At one point, the bathroom tile just popped up until there was no tile because the water was leaking from sinks, and there's only so many ways you can fix that. And the problem is as districts, we're not given very much what we call now DAA, District Additional Assistance, or our capital money. So we're only given, so Mohawk gets between $60,000 and I think we're up to like $80,000 a year. So how do you save that money to fix a bathroom that's going to cost almost $100,000?
Since before 2014, the restrooms needed major repairs. Sinks, toilets, and vents were broken. The original cast iron plumbing from the 1930s was failing. The Arizona School Facilities Division liaison in 2019 observed there was black mold along the walls of one restroom. But the bathrooms serve as just one example. The school was also dealing with a sunken foundation, cracked walls and flooring, major electrical issues with the fire alarm system, and unsafe drinking water. The water situation is unique to Mohawk Valley's rural location. Because of it, it doesn't have access to a municipal water system.
System, and they have their own cisterns and their own little setups if you have a home out here. So we have to have water. There's no system to have water. Tacna's the closest one, but it's up the Mason. It's 5, 6, 7 miles away. So to take water from that water system or Citrus City would be an enormous task. So this school has always had its own little water system. And over time, Department of Environmental Quality, ADEQ, their rules are getting stricter and stricter about the quality of water. So our water plant was no longer making safe water. Through time, since 2014, we've been working on getting safe water, and that's been very challenging. And it took a while to convince the School Facilities Division to help us with that and to find contractors and to find the right way to make that happen. So we do have a brand new water system. We have to do one more part of it.
Since Johnson's deposition, however, Mohawk Valley has gone on to address these needs through a master renovation project in 2022 with the help of the Arizona School Facilities Oversight Board, several grants, and a $1.5 million bond. In our interviews with other Yuma education administrators, we'd heard it was a very unique and unusual endeavor from the School Facilities Board. So we asked Johnson for her thoughts.
It is unusual, and I've shared this message with other people. It was a model project, a project that the School Facilities Division is very proud of. It was great because we had one contractor instead of multiple subcontractors. So as a school system, we didn't have to deal with a roofer and a plumber and all the different agencies. So one contractor then went and subcontracted those.
Johnson credits the bond and combined contracts for helping get the School Facilities Division on board.
I think part of the success of that is that we had a bond that helped us get started. And then we were very lucky that we got excellent project manager and an excellent architect team that came in and saw the possibilities. And they're the ones that really was like, watch this happen. And they did. And so they proposed the idea to wrap this into one contract, and it was very successful.
The project marks a new chapter for Mohawk Valley. But given the school's history, we're going to take a moment here for this episode's school profile. Just south of the Gila Mountains in rural Arizona sits Mohawk Valley School, a little school that currently serves about 130 kinder through 8th grade students. This school has seen a lot of change over the years, as it first opened its doors to students in September 1930. In fact, the main building is listed in the National Register of Historic Places. Superintendent and Principal Shanna Johnson shared a little bit about the history Mohawk Valley's lived through.
When this land was homesteaded, right, and then this little school started, and even down the street, there were concentration camps back in the World War. There was all kinds of action, different things that have happened. I think there was an American Legion across the street. I've been told there was a racetrack of some kind out here at some point. So the old timers back in that era, it was a booming place, right? People were coming west and homesteading. It was exciting. That's when the irrigation was being built. So you just have those deep roots.
In the homesteading days, the district was originally known as the Ming School District. Families had begun moving into the area in the fall of 1924, when the Mohawk Municipal Irrigation District began delivering water and farmland was starting to develop. By 1929, the school was overcrowded, so the main building was constructed with 8 classrooms, restrooms, an auditorium, a kitchen, a library, an office, a janitor room, and a basement for steam heating. Later on, as the school grew, red brick buildings would be added. In the late 60s and 70s, another wing was built. And then in the 90s, with the help of a bond, the school got a new gymnasium. In 1993, a series of unusual Pacific storms led to the most widespread and severe flooding in Arizona since the turn of the 20th century. Roll was not spared from this, and there were articles in the New York Times and LA Times about residents having to evacuate. That year, the students relied on help from Dateland School and Southern Pacific trains to keep up with their schooling. At its peak, Mohawk Valley School was serving more than 300 students. Johnson explained that the numbers have changed as the community changed.
The homesteaders started, so we have this old land, and then the first generation of kids farmed it, and then their children, which would be about my age, a little bit younger, they did not farm it. So then produce came in, and big money, and so most of the landowners lease their land out to produce companies or to growers, and so they just take the lease money because their kids did not come home to farm the family farm. It's very much different. It's become very commercialized and very, very systematic. So it's changed our community.
That said, she still feels Mohawk Valley has a family-centered culture.
I think when you live out of the city, there's still a slower pace. There's still more of a sense of family. There's still more a relaxed pace and a kinder where you get to know each other. We know all of our families. Many, many kids I taught their parents. So I've been at this for a long time out here in this community.
Today, the school looks more refreshed thanks to a master renovation project in 2022. With the help of the Arizona School Facilities Division, a $1.5 million bond, and various grants, Mohawk Valley School was able to fully renovate its campus. This project wasn't just historic for its scale, it refreshed the school in ways it never had. For instance, it replaced single-pane windows from the school's original building constructions.
I think we have a wonderful school environment. I think I have the mission set before me and the passion to make the message that public schools are doing well. And I think there's a lot of messaging out there that public schools are a mess. I invite anybody to come to my school because it's not. We are not leaving children behind. We aren't. If you're struggling, we're going to figure out how to help you. We can't necessarily do brain surgery, but, and some students will always struggle in one way or another. But we're not going to let you fall, and no child is left behind at Mohawk. So we love our children, we love our families, and we keep that close connection. And in my experience with other public schools in Yuma County are doing that.
That connection is maintained by the community as well. Each year, Mohawk Valley School holds well-attended public events, such as its Veterans Day Assembly and Thanksgiving meal. Its fall festival has been going on for 60 years and continues to go strong with old-fashioned carnival games and a barbecue done by the 8th graders. And almost 100 years out from its construction, people still remember Mohawk Valley's first days.
During the renovation, there was a family that had a family reunion, and I believe their grandparents were like the first class at Mohawk. And so I had like all these 80-year-old people and we had taken all the stuff down in the main hallway because we keep all those old pictures up, and they were all in a locker room just stacked. And those people were so grateful. I came up on a Saturday and met them up here, and we spent about 3 hours, and I let them just sort through the pictures and just stand in the space. And they thought that was the greatest thing ever. This fall, we had 2 older women come. They lived in Wisconsin now, but they were probably close to 80, 70s. And they just told old stories, and they walked to the hallways, and they were just so grateful to come and be a part of this and see where they grew up. And, when you're in a small town, you just have that anchor.
For folks who want to learn a little more about the school firsthand, the main building's halls hold framed pictures and newspaper articles of its history. And the library floor contains a square of the building's original gym flooring. On it, a symbol of a Mohawk Valley Brave, because Mohawk Valley School is home of the Braves. Mohawk Valley's master renovation project has turned out very well for the school. Today, the offices, classrooms, kitchen, and bathrooms look brand new. It's not difficult to see why the Arizona School Facilities Division considers it a model project.
The overall consensus that I get is admiration that we're keeping this alive and going. Of course, there's always people who can see that things look okay and they don't see the need of making things modern. And so, of course, there'll always be those few people out there that don't see that. But when I explain how the plumbing was no longer working, when we had old cast iron plumbing that was just disintegrating. When we opened up one of the bathrooms here in the main floor, the one that had fungus, there was basically no plumbing left. It was a skeleton of a plumbing because it had just flaked off and turned into dirt over time. So I make sure that I let people understand it was the guts, and safety is such a big issue now. When I let people know we didn't even have a functioning fire alarm at all times and a PA system where I could tell everybody, a message, that's scary.
While Mohawk Valley has addressed its capital needs, Superintendent Johnson's still concerned for other schools because there hasn't been another project like it since.
It makes me sad that it hasn't been replicated. I have the passion to go help other schools, try to make that happen. But until the state has funding or until a school has at least a little bit of bond to get that started, then that's going to be a hurdle.
But in her eyes, the lawsuit and the capital funding issue are part of a bigger problem, namely the state's approach to funding public schools.
Right now, the state of Arizona is up to $1 billion in ESA expansion scholarships, and the parents are taking to go to private schools, homeschool, whatever they're doing with it. And we only gave $250 million to school facilities. So just roll that around in your mind. If I can make any case to anybody who will listen to me, there's a discrepancy. If you read our court order, walls are crumbling, schools are falling apart. And part of what I believe is, yeah, we made it beautiful. Aren't you supposed to try to make your school clean and inviting? But we were crumbling. Our plumbing was crumbling and things like that were just not working.
Empowerment scholarship accounts, or ESAs, have become a major area of contention in Arizona. Originally, they were school vouchers meant to help students with disabilities access services and therapies outside of the public school system. But they were expanded to universal eligibility in 2022, and that decision has come with a hefty price tag. The latest quarterly report from the Common Sense Institute, a nonprofit research org, confirms that the cost for this year alone is on track to reach $1 billion. It estimates $567 million of that amount is due to universal eligibility. While ESAs in public schools are funded through different mechanisms, they ultimately pull from the same state budget. And the discrepancy in funding for each is why educators like Johnson believe the state's priorities are out of order. When asked about this topic, Danny Edelman of the Arizona Center for Law and the Public Interest replied that
there are many, many things that the legislature can do if it wants to, right? With the people's money. And they do all kinds of stuff with our tax dollars. There are very few things that the Constitution says the legislature must do. And funding our public schools is a must do, not, do it if you think you have enough money left over from all the other stuff you want to do. And I mean, they can find $1 billion for vouchers. Well, I mean, that is a policy that they want to do, but they don't have to do that. They didn't have to create that system. But they have to adequately fund public schools because it says so in the Constitution.
We wanted to know why the state ended up in this position, though. While Crane School CFO Dale Ponder cited the Great Recession as a big influence, Edelman argued otherwise.
During the worst recessionary years, I think there's some validity to that. But Arizona had started taking money out of these systems way before the recession, and they kept doing it way after the recession. Arizona cut more school funding than any other state in the United States during the recession.
Moreover, Arizona's position is comparatively worse when factoring in other states. The state is often ranked near the bottom for education quality and funding. One recent study from Consumer Affairs ranked Arizona dead last for school funding and resources. When asked why that might be, Edelman said it's a matter of priorities.
They've just made it more of a priority than Arizona. We are consistently in the worst 3 or 4 states in the United States when it comes to per pupil funding of public schools. But even worse than that is we're at the very bottom when it talks about effort. And the way they gauge that is like there are some states that are very poor. So like Mississippi is very poor, and they have a similar amount of per pupil funding that we do, but they're a very poor state. So as a percentage of their income, they give way more than Arizona. as a percentage of our income, we're about the worst in the country.
Looking back to the court order for this lawsuit, another school from our service area was used as evidence of the state's failings. That school is Quartzsite Elementary from La Paz County. Since roughly 2018, the school's conditions had become unsafe. Quartzsite had flooring problems, inadequate heating and cooling, roof leaks, mold and rotting wood, and poor air quality. It was also paying to put quote-unquote band-aids on the fire alarm system because fixing the panel would have required rewiring the entire school. At the time of the business manager's deposition in 2021, 3 main classroom buildings were shut down for structural safety reasons. An assessment of the school concluded it would cost more to correct its conditions than to demolish the site and construct a new classroom building. Before receiving building renewal grant approval, however, the board had suggested options for the school to explore. One of them involved storage containers. From the court order, quote, the SFB encouraged KAWC to think outside the box and proposed replacing the modular buildings at Quartzsite Elementary School with recycled storage containers. But the SFB ultimately determined that it could not proceed with the storage container alternative because it can only renovate like for like, end quote. Despite receiving approval to renovate its modular classroom buildings in 2022, the school's operational status remains unclear. We reached out to the district for an interview, but we've yet to receive a response. So we looked at the school's board minutes and social media posts. There are buses going out to Quartzsite, but all school activities seem to be taking place at Ehrenberg Elementary, the district's other school. Older board minutes from this calendar year paint a more dire picture. In an April 22nd work session, board member Monica Timberlake referenced an audit the Arizona Auditor General's office conducted on both Quartzsite district campuses. The audit concluded the district doesn't have enough students to justify operating two. The board expressed uncertainty there's even enough funding to keep Ehrenberg Elementary open either. From the minutes, quote, if the district goes into receivership, it won't be what the community wants. They will come in and shut the school down and it'll never open again. Our district is on that list of 25% that is teetering on financial collapse because schools aren't funded properly. The challenge is the state already wants us to close this school, and the board fought to not do that. We know we will be upside on the budget due to not having ESSER funding that has kept the district afloat the last few years. End quote. Quartzsite shows what's at stake. Now the question is, what happens next?
You'll see at the end of the judge's order, he said, this order, these are my rulings, but this isn't the judgment. I want you, the plaintiffs, to take a month and draft your proposed judgment. And that has what's called declaratory and injunctive relief. Basically, declaratory just means he declares that the system is unconstitutional. The injunctive relief is where he commands the state to fix it.
The plaintiffs have submitted a proposed form of judgment, and the defendants have filed objections to that proposal. Edelman expects the judge to issue a decision on the injunction by late February or early March. The president of the Arizona Senate, Warren Peterson, and Speaker of the House, Steve Montenegro, have said they intend to appeal the ruling. But Crane CFO Ponder believes the better way forward is through unity, not opposition.
While that is their right to do that, I think what we could do instead is bring the governor's office, bring members of the legislature, bring the plaintiffs together and see what we can do to work through these issues. Instead of continuously paying lawyers, let's put this money back into education and let's try to correct these deficiencies. So let's get everyone around the room and say, how can we solve this?
Even if the state appeals after the judge issues a final injunction, Edelman said he is confident in the case.
The law is very clear, and the evidence was overwhelming that the present system doesn't comply with these minimum standards that the Supreme Court explained 30 years ago. So, there's always a chance. Nobody ever says never when you're dealing with lawsuits. But the judge who heard this case was extremely careful and methodical, and he made it very clear there is this minimum that our Constitution sets, and we're below that minimum, and that's unconstitutional. So, we're really confident on appeal.
While the legislature's leadership has made its intentions clear, we thought to ask the state schools chief for his position. During a December visit to Gowan Science Academy, a Crane District school in Yuma, Arizona Superintendent of Public Instruction Tom Horn provided his response.
We have divided jurisdiction, so there's a board that deals with building,
Right.
and that's their jurisdiction. And if I impose on their turf, I'll get into trouble.
But setting jurisdiction aside, Edelman concluded that the real bottom line is the impact on kids, and that that's something everyone should care about.
I always say a child only gets one chance to be a third grader. And, taking years more of appeals leaves that third grader, behind. And it's just not right and it's not fair. So we should care about that third grader. We should care about, his or her teacher, and we should fix this. That's our overarching message is this is fixable. We just have to care enough to do it.
I'm Cisco Stargazer for Educating Yuma, and this reporting supported by a grant from the Arizona Local News Foundation. Educating Yuma is a production of KAWC Colorado River Public Media and supported by a grant from the Arizona Local News Foundation. Questions or comments are welcome. Send them to cisco.stargazer@kawc.org. Our theme music is used with permission and composed by Brian Teo, available at freepd.com. To access this show, just visit the Shows tab on kawc.org. You can also take KAWC with you wherever you go. Just download the KAWC Kofa app and the listening is in your hand. I'm Cisco Stargazer. This is KAWC's Educating Yuma. Thank you for listening.